Okay. Hi, recording. Name Bug ne Malamo. Amin. That's Ilocano for good afternoon, everyone. I thought we'd start today by taking a quick trip back in time, all the way to 1960. A young man standing on the steps of the College Union at the University of Michigan, who soon was to become the President of the United States, challenged students and really the whole country. I'm sure many of you know the words of what he said. To ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That challenge gave birth to something new, the Peace Corps. It was officially established in March of 1961. By the way, next year will be the 65th anniversary of the start of the Peace Corps, 65 years. It was officially established. Oh, I read that already. Okay. And the idea was simple but revolutionary. Send Americans overseas, not as diplomats or tourists, but as partners, teachers, and friends. The goal was to share skills, promote understanding, and learn from others in return. The first group of volunteers went to Ghana and Tanganyika, what now is Tanzania. And on this map, here is now Tanzania, and here is Ghana. Hi, Linda. And Peter, would you like to come up here, please? Come on up. And since that year, over 250,000 Americans have served in 142 countries. For more than 65 years, Peace Corps volunteers have worked in classrooms, health clinics, farms, and villages, helping people meet local needs while building friendships that would last a lifetime. Even though the world looks very different today, the mission is still the same. One, to help people of interested countries meet their need for trained men and women. Two, to help promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of the people served. And finally, three, to help promote a better understanding of other people on the part of Americans as we return to speak to people in America and also greet people from the countries that we served now and be friendly with them and just talk to them, as I have visiting hospitals. Even here in Woodland Pond, there are Filipinos working here. Here at Woodland Pond, we're lucky to have several residents who served in the Peace Corps and lived that experience firsthand. Each of them spent years overseas learning new languages, adapting to new customs, and discovering the real meaning of community. which we have here today, by the way. We moved here, and this is a wonderful community. And each of us met new communities, which was, well, you'll hear about these communities and people. So this afternoon, we'll get to hear stories from Peace Corps volunteers who served in Sierra Leone. My artwork, uh, I'm sorry. Oh, well, Linda, okay, Ghana. And you could ask the volunteers, the residents, about the flag if you want to know about what they represent. What country is this? What country is this? Sharon. Oh, well, I heard it. The Philippines. Okay. And by the way, oh yeah, well, I'll get to that. The Philippines is over here in Southeast Asia. Sierra Leone, over here with the green pin. Ghana, did I get to that yet? So I still have one more, I think. Huh? Oh, that's right. Oh, everyone. Okay, Ukraine. And initially, I couldn't find it on this map because it's kind of small. And I was looking at Russia, so big. And anyway, right up here, right up there, bordering, of course, Russia and other countries. Uh, where am I? So, of course, we're going to meet and hear from them with their memories and lessons from their time abroad. But before they speak, I would like to show you this video, about 15 minutes long. Okay? Could you? Uh, Now I've changed shirts, by the way. I took off my Barone Tagalog, uh, and I won't talk too much longer, but because we have two speakers and maybe even the third. But this is the national shirt of the Philippines, made of pineapple fiber, and it's worn at every graduation and every affair in town. And though Tagalog is not, that's now the national language, and this is the national shirt, Barong Tagalog, not Tagalong, Tagalog is pronounced. And I was stationed, and you'll hear about it in 2 weeks. I was stationed in the Philippines, in the northern province of the Philippines, the most northern province. And we still wore it, but there were Ilocano shirts that were made of more like American fabrics, plaids and different colors. But on various serious occasions, graduations, weddings, a Barong Tagalog is the national shirt. Okay, so let me say that. So this afternoon, we're going to hear stories from Peace Corps volunteers who served in Sierra Leone, Ukraine, Ghana, and the Philippines. As I said, with their memories and lessons from their time abroad, you'll hear about them, and there'll be time for questions and answers. So please join me in welcoming our Woodland Ponds Peace Corps alumni. Thank you very much. Just a Nagnina would be thank you in Filipino or in Ilocano. So who's, okay.
I'm going to stand up. Is this good? Okay. So Ghana was mentioned. It's interesting because later my son didn't go in, one of my sons didn't go in Peace Corps, but he was a musician and went and studied music in Ghana. Louder, is that better? Okay, thanks. Want to reach the last row if possible. So where to begin? I remember the day that I arrived in the city of Mykolaiv. I came by train from Kiev. Most long-term distance travel is by train in Ukraine, and it's overnight trains usually. And I don't know, I think in Mykolaiv there were a lot of small businesses, and I have a feeling a lot of the people on the train with me were small business owners who were going to do business in Kiev, the capital. So where to begin? I had a kind of a shock the last 2 days. I got scammed by 2 different companies. And so I'm a little shaky, but I can focus down here. So the day we arrived in Mykolaiv, there was a station wagon that was there, driven by the guy who was the liaison with other universities. And he was from the University in Mykolaiv. I kept trying to think of the name of it, but it was a Ukrainian name. Anyway, so he drove us to the university dormitories where we were expected to live, which didn't turn out that way because it really had another purpose, that place. It was mostly for Russians who came in to give lectures and drink. It was like, but on the way, we drove the streets of the town and I could see what it was like. And one thing I noticed immediately was there are many not potholes, but the opening for the, you have to go down to the sewer and work on what is that called? Manholes, yes. There were many manholes that were open. So he had to drive around, not going into a manhole. So I said, what's that about? Why did you have to come that way? And he said, well, because of the economic conditions here, people steal the metal and sell it. So they were in kind of a bad shape at that point still. Later, they began to recover and expand as a community, but they were founded by Catherine the Great, who was a Russian Tsarina, and she followed the pattern of the usual spouses of the Russian czars, that she was actually a German princess. That's what the Russians did. They wanted to have a royal line, so they went. There were several small duchies or whatever you call it that were there in the eastern parts of Germany, and they would take a daughter from there. So she was one of the few really brilliant ones, and of course she was not a Democrat, not democratic. She was very authoritarian, but she was part of the development of Ukraine. So one of the things that happened was that her boyfriend, Potyomkin was his name, he was a famous general. He he drove out a lot of the Turks who were living in Crimea. Crimea is, well, it's where the blue pin is. If you could just point it, you don't have to see it. It's you see, it's near Russia. Yeah. No, just leave it there. That's fine. It doesn't matter really, but I wanted you to see it's very close to Russia. Now, the Russians believe that they were the founders of the Russian state. The thing is, they really weren't, because the Russian czars are the ones who got involved and controlled the country. And she specifically, I'm trying to think of her Russian name, but anyway, I had to learn Russian and Ukrainian because the two cultures sort of blend there in that part of the world. And they're actually both dialects of the same language. There's Russian, Belarusian, and Ukrainian are all basically from the same roots. I was sent there to teach because I had been a college teacher in the States. I was without a job, so I applied to Peace Corps, always a good reason, and between jobs. And one day I called a friend of mine who I was living not in Ukraine, I was living in northern Vermont, and she was too. And she was a refugee. She was born in after World War II. Her parents met not in Auschwitz, but maybe it was Auschwitz. Her parents were refugees who met there, and then they had a child, and eventually they got to the United States. So I said to her, "So what's up with you, Faye?" And she said, "You won't believe I'm going to Peace Corps." And I said, "Really?" I didn't realize at our age we could do that. You know, I was still thinking of when Peace Corps was founded. And she said, "Oh, yes, I'm going to go. I'm put in for tropical locations because I hate the Vermont winters." So she went to the Caribbean, the town of the island. I'm trying to think of the name. It was one of the largest ones in the chain of islands that led up to South America. So she was there and extended for several years. And she's now living in California, and I'm still in touch with her. So I made friends where I was. There were no Americans where I was living at that point. There had been an American who's just been sent home because for drinking. He was an alcoholic and didn't do much of anything except drink, and so he was sent. So there were not all Peace Corps volunteers were that carefully chosen. Let's put it that way. You know, it's really hard. It's a huge program. It goes to many different countries, and every country has something else that they're looking for. But they did want English teachers in Ukraine. They were very eager to make the population English speaking. And it's really the second language now in Ukraine. When the Russians moved in the 90s and started killing Ukrainians and trying to take over the land, the thing that prevented them was that the Ukrainians were historically actually more important to the founding of the Russian Federation than people realized, I think. But the Russian culture was brought in by religion from Constantinople, which um, Russian religion. The onions shaped towers and the languages. The language of the church is mostly Old Slavonic, which means it's a language that predated Russian. So if you go to Kiev, you see Kiev is actually a Ukrainian city. It's the capital, but the Russians claim it as theirs. But Kiev is it's the center of the church. It's where Christianity came to Ukraine and from the Middle East. So they have wonderful gardens there in Kiev, and as I said, it's quite a lively culture there. But it was threatened. We knew that there were moles from Russia in the government of Ukraine, and this was a hard thing. So they didn't want to vote for him when he ran again, and there was the Orange Revolution. I don't know if you've heard of that. There was the color revolutions in the Middle East and in Ukraine and in southern Russia. I think the Rose Revolution was in Georgia, the country of Georgia. So fortunately, I left Peace Corps before that happened, but still there was quite a few more years before the Russians really began to take over in a very big way, with big guns and big drones and so on. And so let's see what happened next. Well, one thing is I traveled throughout Ukraine. The city I lived in was, as I said, it was founded by Catherine the Great as a shipbuilding port. It was in the Soviet Union. It was the only shipbuilding port because all the other ports in Russia are cold water ports. So they needed a warm water port to have a successful shipbuilding country, and that was the way it was. But then when the Russians invaded, that ended. They killed off the shipbuilding of the Ukrainians. So so I taught creative writing in this university to fifth-year students in the European system. I think mostly all the countries, they have 5 years of high school instead of 4 years. So they had a fairly good grip of the language by then. So I took a Ukrainian play, a Russian and Ukrainian play, and translated it into English, and we did more of things like that. And stories that were part of Russian short stories, I translated into English. And they made little plays out of that themselves, the students did. And then they participated in this one large play. So I don't want to go on forever, but I was just trying to give you more of a flavor of the country. What can I do about the history? I told you a little bit of history, but it's mostly the life of the people. And the people were very warm, very artistically inclined in Ukraine. I would say more than the Russians. The Russians had serfs, serfdom, who were like slaves. They were tied to the land. They couldn't leave the land. And the Ukrainians didn't do that. They were independent small farmers. So that created a whole antithetical culture to the Russian culture. So I'll just stop now. If you have any questions, you can ask me now, or we can turn it over to this guy who went to Sierra Leone, right? Sam. I'll give this to you.
I was just wondering, when you did your work, what was the predominant age group that you worked with?
They were college seniors and who were majors in English. And they got to actually use their English to do creative work. They hadn't done that before.
How long were you there?
2 years, which is the usual with Peace. I didn't extend because I needed some surgery. I had my first hip surgery replacement after that. And the Peace Corps paid for that because I figured my service had aggravated the thing and I needed surgery. So it's,
Spencer, did you have much contact with the Ukrainian people?
yes, I lived in an apartment building. The university had to find a place for me. That's one of the requirements. If you're going to get a Peace Corps in your community, you have to find housing for them. So they found an old apartment building that was probably was built in the time of Stalin. So it was called a Stalinka. Then there are the Khrushchevkas that came later, and they named it after the leaders. But yeah, so I had neighbors in that building who were eager to meet in America, two women, sisters, and they were eager they would bring me food that they'd cooked so I could taste Ukrainian food. And thanks, Lola, giving me a hand signal here. I need to talk into this. And we did things together. They were they were converts to kind of a religious practice of going into springs, water springs. And so we went to some springs and submerged and did this and that, went on picnics. And so I got to know those neighbors especially well, but other colleagues from the community.
Any other questions?
Spencer, what year did you go?
I went in 2001 and stayed till 2003.
And were there any other Peace Corps volunteers with you, or were you on your own?
There were 50 people in our group that came from, who met in Chicago and flew to Ukraine. But we were in different parts of the country. So we occasionally did get together. There were some get-togethers like Thanksgiving. I remember we got together at American Thanksgiving and stuff like that.
Spencer, what was your relationship with the woman who wrote the play that we did here about Chernobyl?
Oh, the play
How
that
did that all come about?
I don't think the play was written by a woman, but I'm not sure. I wrote the play, but it was not my original idea. I'm trying to think, which play was it that you saw here? I think it wasn't. I think it was when I first came and I was sick, so I couldn't come see it. Do you remember?
Yeah, it was a series of readings of people who had suffered through Chernobyl. And we
Oh.
produced it here, played it here.
Okay. Chernobyl was in Ukraine, by the way. And I think that's why the Russians let it happen, because they weren't so worried about losing Ukrainian lives. They wouldn't want to lose Russian lives.
Hi there. Sorry. You mentioned that you were older than the typical age of people that go in the Peace Corps. But how old were you when you went?
I'm trying to remember. I think I was about 60. I'm 88 now, I guess, 87. But there were 10% of we had 50 in our group that came together we met in Chicago and came together. They were from all over the United States. What was I going to say about that? Anyway, go ahead with more question.
You had an apartment set up. But
Yes.
how did you eat? Could you eat? Did you have to fix your own meals, or could you go out? Or?
We were given an allowance, a monthly allowance. That's the Peace Corps plan. And as I recall, it was about $200 a month. And we didn't have to pay for our housing. That was paid for by the university or whoever was the sponsor of the volunteer.
Well, let's hear it from you, Stephanie. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Here comes Sam.
Well, before there was one question that I heard that I might answer. I guess you're wondering at what age were we when we went into the Peace Corps? So I was 24.
I was about 60. I can't remember exactly, but that seems right now.
Linda was 21.
Sam?
No idea how old I was.
Well, our next speaker is Sam Bussell, and his wife and daughter are here in the front. Thank you for coming, of course. And I met Sam very early in his coming here to Woodland Pond. And then of course, we had something in common. He's part of this talk today, and continue with Sam.
Thank you, Artie. Yeah, Artie was very surprised and alarmed by the fact that there were a few more Peace Corps people there that that had not he had been not aware of. But just so the last couple of months now, we've been talking about it because we've been sharing some number of the ideas that have come out of the Peace Corps. I went in with a family, with the first family I think that was in the Peace Corps. Mainly it was individuals, and with Rebecca, Katrina, her daughter, Max, who they were about 2 or 3 years old, and an older older boy. So we had an extraordinary time. We picked out a house in the middle. Well, we decided to go to Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone was not on the books or in the area, or we just suggested that through a friend of ours who recommended going in the Peace Corps and recommended Sierra Leone, we moved there from New York City. We were living on St. Mark's Place. I had a job with general learning, and our small children were being raised in the city. So when he recommended that, we were very eager to jump on and see. As I mentioned, we were the first Peace Corps family that was allowed or was considered, and we picked out Bo, Sierra Leone, as a place to live with a group of Mende people. And we put our 3-year-old and our 4-year-old into preschool, and our eldest in secondary college, I called them both. And then Rebecca started teaching local women and men to make woven products, curtains, placemats, etc., in a little store where they could sell to visitors as well as the locals. So we had a very, very good friend there, and we were having a very good time. I had created a class early on, having been educated in architecture. I had started off with teaching young men who had no jobs, were unemployed, were young, and really sort of loose and free and wondering what they could be doing. And I suggested a class of a half a dozen folks who were eager to learn more and get some sort of education. And in order to do that, I described to them how to read architectural blueprints, which is very important if you want to build anything, as well as just recognize that if you're going to build buildings for the businesses, that there needed to be that kind of structure. So that was my force, that where we could. I tried to. We got some building materials from this country. We arranged some doctors equipment in order to strengthen the equipment for the Bow surgeons, and generally just sort of providing, and two large air conditioners for what had been a morgue, and nothing in there except the small house for 4 beds. So all of this was, we also renovated an operating theater and arranged for doctor equipment to be sent to our area. So this was a very, very strong, and we lasted there. We were there for 3 years. As was mentioned, there's a 2-year bout in the Peace Corps, but we took a third year because we were so ensconced with our whole family in this lovely little town in the middle of Sierra Leone. So that was really a breakthrough where we had been in the city. We came out into a completely strange country with 2 very young kids and a slightly older kid, and had the time of our lives. So our eldest child, when it was high school, the other kids were preschool, and they actually accomplished a certain amount. Katrina, for example, by the time she was 8 years old, she was speaking a pretty good Mende language, in addition to the other Creole language that was more the lingua franca for Sierra Leone and other areas of that Western Africa. So that was, as I say, extremely entertaining and useful and helpful, interacting with the Mende people. Katrina being carried on the back of one of the 8-year-olds. There was a neighbor. All the kind of integration of what we had and what we had to offer in terms of either language or exercises or ideas, and what they could contribute to us, which was the whole wonderful family of Mende speaking people. So this was really a breakthrough for us. We got out of St. Mark's Place, and we lived a very full and profitable existence. I was involved with a certain amount of the architectural work and building work, and Rebecca teaching the weaving for the local folks. So that really is my fortune to be able to have been doing that, to have it so close with the family all there, and with a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old growing up, and delightfully participating in a totally strange and remote and warm country. So that's my piece of the. So
Questions for Sam or his daughter and why? Yeah. They're right here in the front.
Sam, I just wanted to ask you, what do you consider your biggest challenge since you were living in a tropical country, tropical atmosphere with a unstable government situation many times?
Yeah, the government wasn't a problem. We didn't pay much attention to them, but health was a big problem. Trying to keep these little kids with sufficient Band-Aids and the like, and so that was the challenge I think that we had the most. Otherwise, we had a Land Rover which we could drive around, and we could visit good other parts of the uh, country, and so it was very gratifying.
You mentioned talking about teaching architecture and teaching blueprints. What kind of physical facility did you have there to do the teaching? What was it, like a classroom? Was it a tent or
Yeah.
something in between?
Yeah, that's a very good question because I had brought some material, some drawing material there, a square and etc. But we had very little stuff to do that with, so it was just sort of catch as catch can. But for the most part, it was just drawing informally with paper and pencil and straight edge. So it wasn't very, it wasn't very elaborate or really teaching architectural plans.
Sam, what year did you go to Sierra Leone?
Well, it was when Katrina was 3 years old. 1972.
1972.
1972 to 1975.
And you stayed 2 years?
3.
3 years.
Yeah.
So he extended. That's the maximum that you could stay, extend and work in the Peace Corps, but you can go to another country years later. But a maximum in that country, in any country, was 2 years. And I don't know when the families were no longer accepted, but I think probably one of the biggest reasons was, of course, the health and safety of children. But
Yeah, we were one of the first families, and Rebecca has something to say.
Oh, yeah. As the mother in this group, I've got a lot to say about the health of young children and keeping them. In our family, during the time we were there, first of all, we were very strict about boiling water, peeling fruit. If you wanted to have a salad, it was difficult because there wasn't much lettuce, but every now and then there'd be some lettuce at the market. And that lettuce had to be soaked in Clorox, which, doesn't improve oil and vinegar. But in our family, 3 of us had malaria. Katrina darn near died of bacillary dysentery. Sam had amoebic dysentery. I had an extremely unpleasant bout of something, worms that get under your skin that were caused by the tumba fly landing on laundry that was drying outside. So, the Sierra Leone was known in colonial era because it had been a protectorate for England after slavery was abolished. But it was known as the white man's grave, which put my parents in a state when they heard we were going to Sierra Leone.
And your aunt as well.
And my aunt, a lot of people. But despite all that, despite those problems, we did stay a 3rd year. And all of us felt that it was just the most rewarding time imaginable. We loved the people that we lived with. Our next door neighbors were, of course, in plural marriage, as most Sierra Leoneans were, except those who had converted to a very strict form of Christianity. And Muslims, it was about 50% Christian, 50% Muslim among the population. The Muslims were much more welcoming of traditional Sierra Leone life. So most men had several wives, and next door to us, there were 3 wives and tons of kids. And, we all just meshed and sat there and cooked and learned and talked. And it was wonderful. The kids went back and forth. So I just wanted to emphasize that family was really, as Sam said, we were there as a family and we were accepted because we were a family. There was the only suspicion that I know of during the whole time we were there was that once somebody said that they thought Sam was CIA because on his belt he wore a tape measure.
That's a good one. Thank you for reminding me.
That's wonderful stories and real stories that you went through. And okay, well, it's 5-3. If you would like to hear some more from Peter. Okay, great. Peter?
Thank you, Artie. I can say a few words about Linda's experience in Ghana, but it's really only an outline. I really don't know too many details because when it came time to realize what Linda had done, it was a little late. Linda's memory didn't allow that to happen. But a quick outline, Linda graduated from Pomona College in California. She was 21 years old. She decided to go in the Peace Corps. So she went to Columbia University, I think for about 2 months for training. And I assumed, we have a poster here as well. And I assume that the other people in her program are probably in Ghana as well. Linda spent 3 years in Ghana. I think it was a wonderful time for her. It was a very positive experience. I never heard a complaint about those years in Ghana. She taught in a secondary school. She majored in biology in college, and that's what she taught in Ghana as well. She lived in a small community. It was about 70 miles from Accra, the capital of Ghana. It was called Sogakope. It was not a wealthy community by any means, but I think it was very welcoming to her. And again, she stressed the relationships we had with the other teachers, and particularly the children who were very eager to learn. I don't think there were any disciplinary problems at all at that time. Linda lived in a concrete structure. I think actually there's a picture over here of what it looked like. These are some photos that Linda had. And here you can see some people that were washing clothes in Ghana. And this was behind where she lived. And I'm assuming her concrete quarters were something like this that you see in the background. Linda's fellow teachers in the high school can be seen in this photo. And you can see that they're really all in academic garb in their ties. I think the striking thing about the group of teachers is they were all males. And in the picture, there's only one woman, older woman situated, and I think it was probably the head of the school's wife. And in this photo, there are 3 young women. I'm not sure, but I think they were all Americans. Linda, I think, lived by herself in her concrete apartment. And I don't know about eating or food, but I do know she enjoyed going into Sogakope, the small town, and frequently talked about going to their markets. A few other comments. Linda had some free time, and she and one of her friends actually climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. They traveled by bus to get there, and it's quite a distance if you're going from the west part of Africa towards the more eastern sector. Another experience Linda had was a very significant bout of malaria, which you mentioned. Knowing Linda, I'm sure she took all her prophylactic malarial medications, but despite that had malaria. And she describes being very ill and was actually transported to another town where there was an American doctor to take care of her. I can't think of any other specific things. There are, she had clothing made for her while she was in Ghana. And in this picture, she's modeling what was made for her. And there are also in this photograph, there's some things that she brought back from Ghana. And about 4 years ago, and this is before we contemplated coming here, Linda tried to figure out who might like these artifacts from Ghana. And we approached many people in our community, and nobody seemed interested at all in taking these, what I thought were very important parts of African experience. And it turned out that in our community, there was a physician's assistant who was from Ghana. And I spoke with him, and he came over to the house. He had been forced for political reasons to leave Ghana. And Linda gave clothing, fabrics. There were a lot of wooden carvings of what people had done in Ghana. And it was a very emotional time. He was more emotional than I am. Just Artie, one addendum in terms of language, because Ghana had been in the English sphere, and I think independence was probably 1957, 58. The language that was spoken there was largely English. English was the language. Now, there were also, from what I read, about 60 other dialects in the community, but the teaching was all in English, and I think most of her communication with the people there was in English as well. Good. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Peter? Wait, what? Yes.
After the Peace Corps, what did Linda do was the question.
Linda came back to the States. Her family was largely on the West Coast. She had a difficult time trying to decide what to do. She had a degree in biology. She didn't find ready employment. And because Linda's family was very much a military family, her father was a colonel in the artillery. He was instrumental in the Korean War. She also had a brother who graduated from West Point. So she decided to join the Air Force. So she was, and this was an interesting period of time because Linda had been in Ghana. When she went in the Air Force, she ended up in military intelligence. And it was a problem because the feeling was, could a Peace Corps volunteer go to a foreign country and then come back and be part of military intelligence. Was there an intelligence gathering taking place? Nonetheless, she went to Dayton, Ohio. She ended up doing interpreting satellite photos at that time. And those stories were really interesting because even then the technology was quite fantastic. Linda would tell me she could see a Chinese, for example, playing ping pong in these photos that were given to her. And subsequently, after 1 year doing military intelligence, she was reassigned to Munich, Germany. And the reason for that was Linda was fluent in German because she grew up in Germany during the many tours that her father had there. So she worked in the general's office. She was a liaison to the German community because of her ability to speak German. So that wasn't very brief, but that's what happened. I met Linda in Germany. I was in the American military as a physician, and Linda was working for the general, and we met there.
Let's hear it. Yeah. It's been a wonderful hour, and it looks like you still want to stay. But we are scheduled, or I'm scheduled now, to speak in 2 weeks. And I have a number of slides which will describe my training, which was 2 months in Hawaii. My city, where I was stationed in Ilocos Norte, which is the northern province, known and in the city of Laoag, Laoag, and it's the home province that in 1960, I was there from 64 to 66. In 65, President Fernando Marcos was elected in the home province, as well as the Ilocano region. And Imelda Marcos was there. The stories can go on. I also have slides which I will show on that day of my training, my city, where all the places about the city and the people that I lived with and met, and slides about my job as a co-science teacher with a Filipina in a college, and Northern Luzon Teachers College, with another volunteer in teaching English as a second language, and a third volunteer teaching modern mathematics to graduates who would go into the barrios, into the neighborhoods, to teach elementary English, mathematics, and also if they went to middle school, if they didn't have middle schools, but higher grades, science and math and English. So English was the spoken language in the college. And and then a series of slides of the trips that I took throughout the Philippines.
And that'll be on the 21st at the same time. Thank you all so much for coming for our very first resident lecture series. Give it up for our residents. And thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming. I'm very happy for seeing so many of you. And thank you to our volunteers here.
If anybody is interested, I'm going to keep the photos up from Linda's experience if you weren't able to see them.